we all have constraints, and we're all working the best we can, and we just have to acknowledge that. But the thing is to just keep at it, because you will eventually get better, and you will sort of, it takes practice as with anything else, and to sort of also try and uh, become your own good editor.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Afterword Voices in Translation podcast. This is a podcast that celebrates the art of literary translation, exploring its joys and challenges while spotlighting the often invisible work of translators across India and also around the world. For me, I believe in celebrating literary translators and placing their craft firmly in the spotlight, and that's what I'm hoping to do in every episode. I'm your host, Mohini Gupta, and I'm really excited to bring you some very exciting journeys in translation across languages with every new episode. Today's episode is titled Unmooring Boundaries, Translating Women with Krupa Ge. Our guest for today is the wonderful Krupa Ge, whose translation of Ramchandran Usha's Tamil novella Karai Therum Orangal was recently published as Unmoored in English. This was published by Zuban Books under the Women Translating Women project in collaboration with the Ashoka Center for Translation and the Susham Bedi Memorial Fund. The book is with me right here. Krupa is also the author of two novels, Burns Boy and What We Know About Her. Her nonfiction work, River Remembers, examines the impact of the devastating 2015 Chennai floods, weaving together personal, social, and environmental narratives, and has been praised by Amitav Ghosh as an absolute must-read on the issue. So thank you so much, Krupa, for being here and making time for us today. I'm really excited to know more about your foray into translation with this book especially.
Thank you so much, Mohini, for doing this.
Thank you, Krupa. And maybe we can start today with just your, you've had a career in writing for over 17 years now. So I'm wondering first where it all started for you, and then we'll move into translation since that's the most recent thing that's happened for you. But overall, where did this journey begin for you? If you can start with that.
I think I like to tell this story to anybody. I was in school, and we used to get these Gokulam magazines home back when we were kids. And I used to think, okay, we get these magazines, there are fun stories, and you just read them and you move on with your day. And then one day I found out that my brother had sent in a letter to the editor and was published, and they sent him a little money order for, I think, about 5 rupees for the letter he sent in. And it was both thrilling and like a great betrayal. I didn't even know that you could do such a thing, and that my brother had done this whole thing, and that he had waited until it was published and then he showed it to me. And like any younger sibling, I wanted to immediately copy him, I think, subconsciously. And I think I kind of held on to that grudge. And he also still writes, but I think, I mean, on a lighter note, I feel like I immediately tried to write a story and send it to Gokulam. And I remember him laughing at me because I used an imaginary word that did not exist, because I didn't know the correct spelling of amidst. I was in class 3 or 4, and I'd written amidst instead of amidst, and he just laughed and laughed at me. And he said, "There's no way they're going to publish this story." And this is something that, in hindsight, I've sort of returned to fondly, to think that, oh, that was really my first experience with brush with the printed word, and the kind of shock and impact it can have on you. Like this thing that, wow, somebody else has done this. And art is on some level, some form of imitation. And, when the great masters, learned from their teachers. And so for me, I feel like that's where it sort of really comes from. But then also I wanted to be a journalist growing up, when it was still a respectable sort of profession and a dream to have. And I kind of followed through on it. And then I was working with the Times of India and then the Hindu, and then the fiction bug sort of bit me, and there has just been no looking back. And I think I'm 5 books down now in terms of different genres, and I think this is like the most stable identity I have of my own self now. This idea that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm good at, and so. Until then, I felt very unmoored myself. I didn't feel at home doing anything else, but I feel like, oh yeah, now I found my space. Um, so working alone uh, is a bit of a challenge, which is where like the act of translation itself is, it's really fun in that way.
That's a really great origin story for a writer, I think. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, you did say how your work has spanned across these genres, right? Whether it's journalism, reportage, fiction, non-fiction, and now translation. So I was curious to know about these different hats that you wear, and um, how is your like? Of course, the process is very different for each one. How do you approach these processes differently, and which one do you feel the most at home in?
Came into writing through journalism. So for me, nonfiction is something that comes sort of almost like, even when I'm on a break, I can write up. I can sort of do that. But I feel like and I think in terms of it's very uh, it's very funny that you should ask me this question, because if I were to rank what I think I should be doing, I would say, oh, I should be writing fiction, I should be translating, I should be doing non-fiction, in that order. But if I were to actually sit down and think about what I feel at home doing, where I'm really comfortable, I would think it's probably the other way around. I think nonfiction is something that I can do, and I've also translated nonfiction. Well, I was the editor in chief of the cinema magazine called Silver Screen India, and I translated this wonderful piece by the Tamil writer Stalin Rajangam from Tamil on to English. So even non-fiction translation, I've sort of really enjoyed about the ridiculing of butlers in Tamil cinema, and for their butler English, that's what they call. So the butlers usually come from Dalit communities, and so the sort of things you get to learn while doing nonfiction can be really sort of extraordinary, the kind of encounters that you can have. And so for me, I would say maybe nonfiction slash translation is where I'm sort of actually more at home, but fiction sort of is really something I feel challenged by, and I feel like my smartest best, if I can say that, when I'm trying to achieve a piece of fiction, when I try to sort of get what the idea is in my head onto the page, I feel like, but it's very hard. It just takes years. I've worked on a short story for 10 years, and it's about to come out in like one of these big magazines at the end of this year, and I feel like, wow, did I really work on this piece for 10 years? I mean, what is going on? So it's interesting that you asked where I feel at home. So that kind of really made me think.
That's interesting. I guess for fiction, it is a more, I don't know how to define creative, but I guess there's a different kind of creative process involved in writing fiction. So I can understand that, and it's interesting that you would rank that as the number one thing that you would like to do. But yeah, it's always confusing how that plays out. I didn't realize that you had also translated nonfiction before. That's really interesting. I did want to ask you how, because I think this is your first sort of full book translation, right? So I was curious about how you thought that this creative process was different. And of course, your language has been a part of you forever, and I'm guessing your bilingualism or multilingualism has always been a crucial part of your life. So, how was it to engage this deeply with a Tamil text? And translators say that it's the closest form of reading. So, did you feel like that, or was it too close to home to kind of have that distance, or how did you feel while engaging with the Tamil language in this way and then sort of translating it into a full book like this? What was your process?
I think I was absolutely excited to sort of bring, something so nuanced onto English, and to say that, oh wow, look at this story with so many layers. Look at what the story is achieving without really being pompous. Without It's doing it so matter of factly, so casually. It's about three women, coming together in the end, and forming. a sort of a sisterhood or a friendship that transcends everything else that's going on in their life, and it really eschews stereotypes, even in terms of it sort of understands even the worst instincts in its people. It sort of is matter of fact about it. It is not like, there are no broad strokes with which people are painted, and even like this character of a sheikh who's married, obviously he's done something pretty abominable if you think about it, come off to another poorer country and married off a young woman, and he's pretty old himself, but even to him the story is, is sort of kind and sort of shows you where he's coming from, and what his circumstances. And so I felt like I was very excited to bring something like this to another sort of language and readership. And for me, in terms of the close reading, again, it was the excitement of finding a story like this set in my hometown, set in this neighborhood that I was very familiar with. All of that was just the sheer thrill of, hey, look what's going on here, just sort of being a part of that was very interesting for me. And I still feel like there's this big potential even in this story, in terms of even if it were to be made into like a visual, translated into a visual medium, because it's a very unusual, powerful idea, right, of women going out to work to another country, and we don't, and it's so commonplace. You go to any of the Middle East countries, you do see women like nurses, and especially in the medical field, and in terms of all of the domestic labor that is being carried out is being performed by women. So where are these women coming from? What about their families, their backstories? And so I feel like, despite the translation, I still feel like, oh, I wish I could do more for the story to reach more people. So that's how excited I was about this book when I encountered it.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask you what drew you to the book, so you've answered that, which is great. And I'm very interested in sort of talking about Chennai as well, and how it features in all of your writing. Really, how it's sort of almost a character in throughout your writing. We'll come to that, and also about the women characters. But I wanted to delve a little more into the translation at this point. And
Great.
one thing that I was really curious about when I was reading it was because I'm interested in language. You mention a lot of, when the characters are speaking, you say that they said this in Tamil or in Urdu or in Hindustani or in Arabic, for instance. So I was curious, how was it? Obviously, I haven't seen the original. So was this a choice you made in translation? Does it exist in the original? And if there is
So
such a variation in the original, then how do you capture that in translation? Because that's a really difficult thing to do across languages. Yeah.
yeah, that's a very interesting question, because actually, the book itself sort of observes quite a bit of the variation in language. So, because the book also uses travel to sort of move the story forward, and then as the characters are traveling, the language keeps the register they're hearing is changing constantly. And so the book captures the sound aspect of it really well. Yes, the use of, like, the word, for instance, Hindustani was a creative liberty from my end, for instance, but Usha does observe that the officer character in the book from the embassy speaks a mix of Hindi and Urdu, for instance. It's sort of like a, a nod to, the origins of that particular character as well. And but the book sort of registers its own linguistic or diversity at several places. So first, she doesn't know how to. It opens itself with the fact that she does not know really how to read Arabic, but she knows to sign her name in Arabic, and then she does it. And then the book also pauses to acknowledge the different dialects spoken by the different women. And so they even have a conversation about one of them having like a really a drawling sort of way of speaking Tamil, And for me, that sort of was extremely helpful because as a cue in terms of how do I convey what exactly this character is speaking to another reader. So it made the job of translation in those spaces really beautiful and easy for me in the sense that yes, obviously I can't convey the dialect because that is something that all translators grapple with, but the fact that the writer has registered this, and this is really the beauty of language, right? Like even when we are speaking a language, we are speaking different versions of it, and so when we are encountering a person who speaks the same language in a different way to register it, so all of that was it was sort of already there in the book, and in some places I did feel like it would be better to just have these words in the same in Tamil to sort of acknowledge, like the joke about engineering college. She gets the Tamil word for engineering college wrong, and the character laughs about it despite everything that's going on in her own world and life. And I felt like that had to stay in because there are some places where you can do the in joke and some places where you have to explain the joke, and I felt like this was one of those spaces where just letting the joke be would be a service to the reader as opposed to trying to translate it and ruin the joke.
It's really interesting. I think, yeah, language does play a very interesting role in the way things develop in the book. And humor is something that I wanted to talk to you about because I think that's one of the toughest things to convey across language. Like you said, you leave the joke as it is and then risk that the reader may not get it in that language, or do you translate into a different joke, but then it can fall flat in that context? And and that linguistic variation that you talked about, it is so difficult to convey given that English is the one language that you're translating into and you can't really have that variation there. So yeah, that's interesting how you dealt with it. But about the humor thing, I was curious about how you navigated some of these sort of cultural challenges. Even discussions around caste, class, religion, some of these are extremely layered culturally. So how do you do that in a language like English, which may not have that vocabulary or those inbuilt kind of I mean, even prejudices. But how do you sort of convey it? How do you convey these layers in English? And also, I wanted to ask you if you're keen to maybe read out a little bit to kind of demonstrate this. So up to you. If you'd like to do that, I would love to hear you read a bit of the book to sort of, yeah, show us how you've dealt with it.
Right, let me just see what I can read. And I feel like the question is actually pretty interesting in terms of how do we convey this sort of divide when we translate. And I feel like um, um, just the fact that again, I think I kind of also lucked out with this particular book because the book itself registers, it sort of is constantly looking inward at its characters and outward at the others they're speaking to. And so if you think about for instance Indu, who's clearly married, has had an intercaste love marriage. She registers it herself and says that oh, but I didn't care, that he was from a family that eats meat, and I'm from a family that did. And so this sort of matter of fact acknowledgement of what is going on within the text, as opposed to just hand wringing and sort of wondering, how do I say this politically correctly? Or the text does not go into all of that. It basically gives you facts and says this is it. These are the kind of circumstances these people are from. And I think that sort of made the process of translating those characters also very easy, in the sense that that there's no conflict in the mind of the writer in terms of who these characters are, and so she has laid out very clearly for you to follow, and so for me I just sort of use those cues to uh, establish who's standing where. Even the older woman who goes to Dubai to work as a caretaker, even for her, it's she is very aware of her own status, of her own class, of her own. So these are women who are intelligent, thinking women who are not under any kind of delusions of their place in society, and they are very matter of fact about it. They're not fighting their fates. They're not exactly uh, crying over it in that sense. They're this is the hand fate has dealt me with, and this is what I'm doing. And so in that sense, I think I was also pretty lucky to have encountered a text that was inherently nuanced and that inherently knew, uh, so it wasn't that I was bringing this into the translation, but that those cues already existed, from the writer herself. And so for me, that was actually another helpful sort of way to translate. One of my favorite things about the book is also that, the fact that it doesn't actually, the narrative of the book is sort of almost parallel. So the story moves forward anytime a character is traveling or moving from one place to another. And when the book sort of literally pauses and the two women are just walking around the street, and in the movie we might call this, what do they call it when there are two women characters who have a name and talk to each other? Oh God, I'm blanking
Bechdel,
out.
the Bechdel
Yeah,
test? Yeah.
yeah, the best. I've
Yeah.
written so many columns about this. I can't believe I forgot. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this was literally like, I mean, obviously the whole book is like, it's about women, but I felt like, for people who don't know how to pass the Bechdel test, this is just like a complete, mm, primer on what women characters in fiction can look like. This is just two women who are barely friends, who are acquaintances, who are taking a stroll through a street and stopping by to smell the flowers. And I thought that was just completely beautiful. The fact that this was written in this way. So I'll just read a little bit from the chapter, and since it also has the joke that I spoke about. The two women left Aisha's home and made their way to the temple, crossing many bungalows and new apartment buildings on the way. Indu liked that there were many trees along the street. I can't quite believe this is Chennai. Looks like Bangalore, no? I didn't even know this neighborhood. She breathed in the scent of trees bursting with flowers. Of course, Ma. Once you've lived here, you won't like living anywhere else. See, behind Saidapet Court, there's only one road that goes in and out. On this side is Anna Poriyal College. On that side is the Adyar River. Behind us is Koturpuram. But you can't go to any of these places. There's a large wall that separates us from them. There's not much crime here either, but we get too many monkeys from the college. Indu couldn't help but smile when she heard Jamila say poriyal, stir fried vegetables, instead of the Tamil word for engineering, poriyal. Looking around, she asked, monkeys for real in this city? You can't see them after dark, but early in the morning they'll begin their attack on everything, Jamila said. There's even a hillock here. A hillock too? Yes, Little Mount, that's the name of the bus stop as well. You see these two streets? The hillock is behind them, probably as tall as a 3 or 4 story building. There's a church at the top. The neighborhood is a lot of Christians. Take me there one day, Jamilama, Indu said, and then asked, what is that scent? Such a striking fragrance. She looked up at the tall, handsome tree in front of them. This tree's flower. Wait, what's it called? You people use it as an offering to God, Jamila said, and asked the man standing inside the compound to pick up a flower and give it to her. Some petals had fallen off, but when she opened the flower that had closed in on itself, she said, this is Nagalingam. Look, it looks like a lingam. I felt like this was just the one of my most favorite parts of the book because of this, right? Literally stopping to smell the flowers in the middle of all the thing that's going on for these two women was. I felt like it was sort of that itself is sort of like a radical, scene to place in fiction.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for reading that, Krupa. Actually, it was just, yeah, so much better when read out in your voice, I think. And that joke really is so seamlessly done. Like, the more I think about it, the more incredible it is to me how you've managed to it seems effortlessly. It's obviously never effortless, but it seems so effortless the way that you've been able to explain or like make sure that the readers will get this joke even if they don't understand the language. So I think that's really yeah, commendable.
Thank you.
And yeah, you're right about the this sort of the spirit of resistance that I guess the book originally has. And that's another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which is this the presence of strong female characters and the spirit of resistance within very, very oppressive patriarchal structures, and how that also is something else along with the city of Chennai. I think these two things really tie all of your different kinds of works together. Especially since we're talking about this book, which has been published under the Women Translating Women series, I am curious to ask you whether it's a deliberate choice that you make while choosing to write or translate. Is that something that you consciously do to engage with female characters this way, or yeah, it's just something that you get drawn to, I guess?
I think in a way I can't help it, of course, in that sense. It's sort of like this is my world in that sense, and I can't help but uh, you know think like the woman that I am, or look at the world as the woman that I am, and try to create the world from my point of view. Because what am I going to get from trying to write about men, or trying to? I mean, my new book is called Burns Boy, and it is about a boy, but it also has two very, strong women, uh, and their voice is sort of heard very loudly in the book, and almost even louder than the main character himself. And I feel like um, and I feel like this is the only way I also know to. This is my worldview, and this is my experience, my lived experience, and so this is the only way I even know to sort of engage with the world. It is through these points of views, and this is the only thing I can relate to, and I feel like even though uh, as a writer, of course, you can become anybody and you can write as anybody. I feel like uh, I feel like because I'm able to understand the nuance, uh, because I'm in a position to write nuanced female characters. I would much rather keep doing that than sort of try and do something that doesn't come to me so naturally as well. So in that sense, it's also like, if i'm if this is what I'm good at, and if this is what I know very well, maybe this is what I have to offer to the world as well. And if there's not enough of that, then that's also even good.
Yeah, that's really beautifully articulated also. Thank you. I also wanted to build on this and build on um, the thoughts that you expressed. And this is like a big debate in the sort of global translation world, also about whether the translator of a book has to sort of have the same life experiences or sort of be able to empathize with the writer. So I'm just wondering if you want to talk about it, what your thoughts are on that. Do you think because I don't know if you follow those debates, but yeah, there have been some controversies and people saying that okay, someone from this gender or this region cannot translate someone from another, and so on. And I'm just wondering, especially with this series as well, the Women Translating Women, I think it's extremely important, and I think it is very important to bring in that sense of lived experience and empathy. But I'm wondering how you feel about that.
I think it's I mean, like anything else, I think the first step is actually just owning up and acknowledging, which is something that I also, if you are a translator of a work, or if you are trying to be an intermediary in some way or if you're trying to engage with the text in any particular way, I think one way that you can overcome a lot of these sort of struggles is to upfront acknowledge the differences between you and who you're translating, and if there is a problem of power, if you are situated in a place that is much more powerful than the person you're translating, maybe being a little bit more transparent about why you're doing this, what has drawn you to, what exactly are your intentions, why should you be the one to translate this text, or what drew you to the text. You would actually be doing a great service to the text, right? If you sort of went ahead and acknowledge what is it that makes you the person, or what is it that makes this text so appealing to you. I think that in it, I think this sort of basic acknowledgement would go a long way in sort of also, there's also a sort of mistrust, and are people trying to appropriate, are people trying to profit off of marginalized voices. Those are genuine concerns, even within the Indian context of caste. Which is it is sort of my good friend Yogesh Maitreya talks about this often, about how Brahmins are the biggest translators in India right now, and especially that is obviously historically because of our access to English, and the fact that a lot of uh, people who are translating into English have also sort of capitalized on they can understand market trends, and if they understand that there is this trend of Dalit voices doing well internationally, then obviously the Brahmin translator is going to be the one to first grab that opportunity. And so these are genuine concerns that need to be engaged with, and also the sort of acknowledgement of how or why we are engaging with this text, what exactly do we stand to gain, what exactly are we losing, what exactly, I'm not saying everybody should give up, all of their opportunities. That is not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that be honest and be upfront as to why you're engaging with the text. I think that bare minimum is more than enough. Nobody's telling you not to, translate, and nobody can stop us also. And so it's a great question, actually, and in my opinion, I feel like this sort of translators do get this space to have their own voice heard. There's a space to leave your own note wherever it is that you're engaging with the text, and I think doing something like that is a great way to acknowledge these gaps.
Yeah, thank you for being candid about that. And I think it's a really great suggestion to have that kind of sense of honesty and acknowledgement, especially if there is a power dynamic involved. And yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking about it. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to a different thought, which is around the city of Chennai. On a
Mm.
yeah different note, so we talked about how that is something that really comes alive as almost as a character in your work. It's true in Unmoored as well, and all of your fiction as well, and of course your nonfiction also. I'm just wondering how you yeah how you engage with your city. How do you preserve something that doesn't really manifest in dialogues, but you still bring it alive in the sort of contextualizing of these characters and conversations? So yeah, just to talk a little bit more about your relationship with the city and how that shows up in your work.
Yeah, yeah. So this is something that I actually, I mean, this is another thing. Just as I can't help but write about women. I think I can't help but write about Chennai because I've lived here all my life, and in that sense, it's almost like, I mean, I do write about other places, but I feel like Chennai is sort of, I mean, it's sort of very natural that if I start writing something, I sort of naturally assume that I'm going to set it in this city. And I also like the idea of my body of work being sort of almost like a way to read the city. And I'm a huge fan of Domenico Starnone, and I love how you can see Naples through his eyes, and it's the same with Ferrante as well. And I kind of like this idea of a writer's work being in conversation with the city in that sense, or Murakami and the various Japanese cities, and so that is something that I actually quite like, and I think this is one of the good fun things that we get to experience as writers, writing about a place, or bringing that lived in experience, because writing as such is not like the funnest job out there, because the act of writing itself is quite fun, but getting it published is a completely different experience altogether. And I think one of the great joys of, for me especially, has been trying to bring the city that I know and that I have experienced to life. In my new novel, for instance, um, I've tried to not particularly recreate the places that you might encounter, as opposed to the feeling of being in the city, what you might actually experience, uh, you know, um, once you're from here, and if you were in the 90s, what might you have experienced? So that's also a sort of challenge, and I felt like even Usha and her think she does a good balance of the idea of being at home, as well as the idea of exploring the city through new eyes, both of which is what any writer is trying to do when they're writing about their own city.
Thank you. And what we haven't talked about actually is the fact that at the end of this book are also two short stories that you've translated. And for me, I mean, there was a lot for me to learn while reading the book. Also think about in terms of how you've translated and those things. But I think one of the biggest takeaways for me as a foodie was the concept of kushka. And I didn't know there's something like kushka. So maybe you can tell our listeners about what it is, and maybe also where you can find the best kushka
Kushka.
biryani in Chennai. I think that'll be a
Oh,
great
that's
takeaway. Yeah.
That's a great. Kushka is basically the rice, the biryani rice, but served without the meat. And if you go to like these roadside eateries in Chennai, you would, at the end of the day, when they're done with all the pieces, they would sort of be selling kushka, and that sort of in any sort of hotel, and it sort of eventually became a delicacy by itself. It's like kushka is a thing that you go to. Uh, that you sort of look forward to, sort of like the burnt bits of rice, or whatever food that usually is the leftover, but then people eventually take to liking to it. But Triplicane in Chennai is sort of like this hub, um, and there's also this other area called Oteri, where they have these roadside places where you can really enjoy kebabs and biryanis, and those are the two places where you get really good roadside food, and you, if you went later in the evening, you could come away with like some kushka uh, very sort of happily. And for me, just I had to leave the title just as it was in there, because it was just so delightfully quirky. And this is actually one of the first pieces of Usha's that I translated. It appears as part of an anthology before, and for me, uh, this was actually my first introduction to her work, even before I read the novel, or even before I read the other short story. And so for me, um, even in this story, if you see the nuance of, there are like power dynamics, and there's nuance um, in terms of looking at all of the characters who are all going through their own problems, and who are all slightly gray. Um, so so even when I was translating this story, I knew that I was translating like a very special writer, so
Thank you. I've never been to Chennai, so you have to take me to these places the next time I visit.
done. It's my favorite
um,
thing to do, take people out to eat.
Perfect. Thank you. And I was also wondering, so once this book came out, I was wondering if you had, readers come back to you with something that surprised you or something that made you smile, just in terms of the reception of the book. How has it been for you? And yeah, have there been some comments or yeah,
It's so
anything
funny
that
you should ask me. I was at the launch in Delhi actually, for the book, and at the end of the conversation, somebody came up to me and they said, "Oh my God, I was so surprised the first time I read in so much detail about this particular neighborhood, because I used to live there." the exactly where I read from the portion that I read about. It's set in like this really nice part of city, and she said, "Oh my God, I haven't read about it before, and it was so nice to sort of read about this in a book." And I grew up there myself in that neighborhood, and for me to have, and my first book was also sort of about. It sort of begins with the flooding that happens in this particular neighborhood, and so for me it was just like wow, so many people. It's like this really small neighborhood, and the number of people that I've met who have since told me, "Oh, I'm actually from there, and I quite enjoyed this book." And I was like, "Wow, uh, how many people are living here?" And it looks like almost everybody is. And the fact that there are two writers from the same neighborhood now, and recently I found out that another writer is also from there. And so I'm just like, wow, this place, maybe there should be a writing tour of this neighborhood. And so for me, that was actually really, really nice to have somebody who lives there come and tell me that they enjoyed reading about their neighborhood.
That's really nice. You brought a kind of community of people who have this neighborhood in common together in some sense through this reading
Yeah,
experience. Yeah, that's a really lovely impact, actually. And yeah, so you said that your new book has just come out, Burns Boy, as well, right? I'm also curious to ask if you're working on something new, or what is the next sort of project you're working on? Is there another translation in the works? Yeah, just curious about where you're at now.
yeah, yeah, I am, but I'm not allowed to tell you lots about it. I kind of checked with the people involved, but I can tell you that it is a collection of stories being translated from Tamil into English that I'm putting together as the editor of an anthology. And I'm also translating one of the stories that will appear in this anthology. So I'm very, very excited about it. And I was just telling somebody else also in an interview recently that I spent the first half of this year blissfully reading about maybe 100, Tamil short stories, just so that I could figure out who to, involve in this project. And it was a superb immersion into that space. And there is so much happening in the Tamil, especially the short fiction world. There are so many beautiful websites, and there's so much great encouragement of talent that is going on, and it's sort of a place that is really buzzing with energy, and it almost made me feel sad as a English writer of fiction. I felt like maybe I should be writing in Tamil myself, but I don't think I've had the practice or the craft to do that. But the anybody who can read Tamil, I would definitely encourage them to go and look up, you know, these magazines like Solvanam, and there are so many. There are even blogs where they sort of list the best short stories that have come out every month. So there's this blog called Citril, which I also was following, where they would rank the stories that the different readers read that month, and that was also a really good guide for me to figure out who to read. So yeah, reading in Tamil, thinking about it through the lens of translation, and seeing what would work. And I've been actually doing all of that this whole year, so it has been a superb year for me in terms of this translation project and reading.
That's incredible that, I mean, not just that the writing is flourishing, but also that the reading is so active and engaged, and there are people who are like ranking these pieces of work and things. That's really very heartening, actually, to know. I don't know how many languages this is happening in. So that's really wonderful. And the collection sounds very exciting. So I look forward to hearing more about it whenever you're at liberty to share. A last question before we move on to our final rapid fire segment, which is a new segment in this podcast. But the final question that I just want to ask you is a little sort of piece of advice for people who are first time translators. Um, what you would advise in terms of either the process or the publishing process, either translation process or publishing process, any sort of things that you'd like to share from your first experience or tips that you can share with people who are doing this for the first time would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think in terms of, you know, as with any other craft, I think it takes practice. Um, and so, I mean, I've even worked on a novel for 10 years, and I can't go back to it because I feel like, oh my god, I really did not do a good job. And I think the responsibility feels like the weight is so much more when you're translating, because not only are you engaging in a craft, are you trying to creatively use your brain, but you're also, bringing somebody else's language. And so it can actually be pretty daunting and scary. But I feel like, as with anything else, it takes practice. And my advice would be to just keep at it. And if you think something didn't work, and that to just sort of acknowledge it and move on and try and see if you can how else you can get better at it the next time. And so that is something that I myself have had to sort of struggle with, as both as a writer and translator. And I feel like I often feel like I failed the standards I've set for myself. I often feel like, oh, I didn't meet this very high standard that I've set. So, yeah, I do this for other people when I read their work, so I'll have to set such high standards. But the thing is, we all have constraints, and we're all working the best we can, and we just have to acknowledge that. But the thing is to just keep at it, because you will eventually get better, and you will sort of, it takes practice as with anything else. And to sort of also try and uh, become your own good editor. And I feel like that is something uh, that even as a writer, I find very valuable in my own self. If you can't find an editor who will sort of help you out with this, but to sort of learn the craft of editing well for yourself, and that will come in very handy when you're trying to translate a piece of work. um, because when you're translating into English, often there is this really big fear of over explaining, or being redundant, or trying to sort of, instead of bringing the work into English, trying to explain the work in English. And so, be wearing that editor's hat can really help bring your work to a certain point. And in terms of advice for publishing, I would say it is a tough sort of market out there to be published. But I think if you're looking to get started, translation is actually the most exciting space to be in right now. And because there's interest from international publishers, Indian publishers, everybody's on board. Nobody is any longer questioning, uh, you know, why something should be published. Everybody accepts that. So, if you're a translator, it's actually a very exciting time to be working in the publishing space right now.
That's excellent advice. Thank you so much. So, like I said, we're going to end with a translation rapid fire. It's just three very quick questions. I promise they'll be easy to answer.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just start.
Yeah.
One Tamil word that you wish English had.
Ayo. See, yeah.
That's true. Okay, second, music or meaning, what to retain in translation.
Rapid fire, but I'd say music.
Okay,
Um, I like the idea of it's very romantic. I feel the idea of it being music.
okay, yeah, I like that answer. One book that you wish you had translated.
Sangam poetry. I am actually thinking about doing it. So some form of, but as part of a larger non-fiction work.
Oh, that's very exciting. Okay, fingers crossed. I look forward to that already. Especially since you've answered the music question, so that's
Yeah.
brilliant. But thank you so much, Krupa. I had a really wonderful
Thank you.
time speaking to you and hearing about your translation and translation process and work, and just your writing and experiences in general. Thank you so much for sharing so candidly, and I hope to yeah, meet you in person someday and talk more about translation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for letting me speak. There's so few people who are allowing women to speak so freely and for so long without just interjecting, and it's such a relief to sort of speak with another woman. Just not have to fight for your space and your thoughts. So I'm so glad you're doing this. Thank you.
And